Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, Optimizing Duty Drawback for Maximum Refunds. Of the many services Flexport offers to provide end-to-end solutions for its customers, including ocean, air, truck and rail freight, brokerage and trade advisory, financing, and insurance, today we'll be going over one cost-saving solution, which is duty drawback. But first, a few housekeeping notes. On your screen, you'll see a sidebar to the right of the main stage. If you're having any technical issues and need assistance during the live webinar, please message us in the help chat located on the sidebar. In the menu above your screen, you have two tabs. In the first tab, you can download a copy of today's slide deck, and in the second tab, there's a brief feedback survey for this webinar. We love your feedback, so please fill that out before exiting the webinar. At the end of the webinar, we will also be hosting a short Q&A session, so please add your questions to the Q&A function on the right side of the screen. Your name and question will not be visible to the audience. A brief legal note. Please keep in mind that all content provided in this webinar is informational and may not be customized to your specific business requirements. We recommend reaching out to a Flexport expert to discuss specific dynamics affecting your individual business cases. My name is Monica Pascarella, the Drawback Manager here at Flexport. I'm a licensed customs broker and have been at Flexport for the last 3.5 years. I've been managing drawback programs now for over 12 years. And with me presenting today is Samantha Barber. Here's our agenda for today. We're going to kick things off with defining drawback, and then we'll jump into eligibility, types of drawback, process and common challenges, how to estimate refund potential, and finally a little bit about how Flexport can help optimize your drawback program for maximum refunds while minimizing your effort. Lastly, we'll close it out with a little Q&A, so be sure to get your questions in. So let's jump right in. We'll start by defining drawback and giving a little background. By its simplest definition, drawback is the refund of up to 99% of certain import duties and fees paid on imported goods upon their exportation or destruction, or used in the manufacturing of exported or destroyed articles. It is only 99% because 1% is kept in customs for administrative fees. It is estimated about 70% of eligible drawback goes unclaimed every year, totaling in billions of losses for U.S. companies. For perspective, in 2023, there was $3.9 billion in drawback filed. Drawback is not a new concept. It's an export incentive program originally enacted on July 4, 1789, and is regulated by U.S. Customs under 19 CFR 190 and 19 U.S.C. 1313. After 235 years, the purpose remains the same. That is to allow U.S. exporters to increase global competitiveness, profit margins, create and maintain jobs in the U.S., and promote U.S. innovation and manufacturing. Eligibility. What duties can be recovered with drawback? Ordinary customs duties paid upon entry, Section 301 duties. Most notably, this is the additional duty starting in mid-2018 on many imports from China, which has had a big impact on companies that may have previously paid low or no duty on their imports. Section 201 duties, also implemented in 2018, initially impacting solar cells, panels, and washing machines. Certain marking duties, internal revenue taxes, which is on certain goods like distilled spirits and wine, the merchandise processing fee, the harbor maintenance tax, and other import fees for certain drawback provisions. Drawback is not eligible on Section 232 duties on steel and aluminum, agricultural over-quota duties, anti-dumping and countervailing duties, and the MPF and HMF fees for certain drawback provisions. Let's break down the definition of drawback. Drawback is a refund of import duties paid on exported or destroyed products. So think about your business for a moment. Are you importing and paying duty? If you're not, are you sourcing from a domestic supplier that is? The second part of the definition is exported or destroyed. For purposes of drawback, exported is defined as the movement of goods out of the US and into another country. Destruction means complete destruction so that the merchandise has no commercial value. So again, think about your business. Are you exporting your imported products? If you're not, are you selling to a domestic customer that is? Who can qualify for drawback? In order to have a drawback opportunity, two things must exist: imports with duties paid and exports or destroyed goods. The simplest drawback scenario occurs when a company is importing and paying duty on goods and exporting those goods. But again, any party along the chain of commerce may be eligible to claim drawback. Again, importing is key, but you can claim drawback even if you're not the importer. If you're exporting any products that you purchase from a domestic company who imports, or you use components that you purchase from a US supplier that imports to manufacture a product that you export, you can receive a refund of duty that you never even paid. If you're not exporting, but perhaps you're selling your imported products to a company that exports, likewise, exporters can assign the right to claim drawback to the importer. Exports to all countries, with the exception of Puerto Rico, are eligible for drawback. However, there are certain additional requirements associated with exports to Canada, Mexico, and Chile, and to US territories. So your export destination, among other criteria, may determine which drawback provision is best suited for your program. Shipments to Puerto Rico are not considered exports. However, exports from Puerto Rico are eligible for drawback in the same way as US mainland exports. The time frame for drawback was simplified with the modernization of drawback under the Trade Facilitation and Trade Enforcement Act of 2015. The not-so-new guidelines allow a claimant to claim drawback on a U.S. entry with an import date within 5 years of the claim filing date. The export must fall after the import date. There are a few exceptions. When filing claims under rejected merchandise returns from retail, you may still go back 5 years from the date of filing. However, you are limited to an export or destruction within 1 year of the import date. Additionally, when filing a petroleum claim, the export must fall within 180 days from date of entry in order to qualify. A claim may be liquidated after 1 year after claim filing, or all underlying import entries have been liquidated. Note that the liquidation date may be extended up to 3 times. A drawback claimant must ensure they're maintaining proper records for 3 years after the date of liquidation, which could be as long as 12 years from the date of import. I'm going to pass the next section over to Samantha.
Hi everyone, I'm Samantha Barber. I am a drawback lead here at Flexport, and I've been here for 2 years. I've been filing drawback for about 8 years. Next, we're going to talk about the types of drawback. There are 27 different ways to claim drawback. We will focus on the 3 most common categories, which are unused merchandise, manufacturing, and rejected. You may file unused merchandise and manufacturing drawback through both direct identification and substitution. Rejected merchandise falls into 4 categories, which we'll dive into in a little bit. Unused merchandise. Unused merchandise is exactly what it sounds like. A company imports an item into the US and it is subsequently exported or destroyed. It's worth noting there are certain allowable operations where goods are still considered unused. While this isn't the extensive list, this can include testing, cleaning, repackaging, refurbishing, adjusting, replacing components, relabeling, disassembling, etc. A process which is not amounting to a manufacturing or production process. As mentioned, you may claim unused merchandise through substitution or direct identification. We'll focus on direct identification first. This is also known as 1313J1. Under this provision, the export must occur after the import. The item must be unused. It requires a direct traceability using a unique identifier, a PO number, a lot number, serial number, box number, etc. Or you must implement an alternative accounting method. Import through export must match at the SKU or that unique product code, style, color, size level for apparel. You are able to recover 99% of duties and fees, and exports to Canada and Mexico are allowable. Let's imagine a scenario where a company imports a men's black t-shirt in size large and subsequently exports the same exact t-shirt. In this scenario, the imported item can be traced from the import through exportation by a unique identifier. Perhaps it's a PO number. Many commodities, including apparel companies, likely do not utilize a unique identifier that can be traced from importation through exportation. Using a similar scenario, let's say a company imported several shipments of the men's black t-shirt in size large, and they don't have that unique PO number. Or perhaps a PO number is traceable, but there are several shipments, so it's impossible to identify which import that exported t-shirt came in on. That is when we would employ an alternative accounting method to assign that required unique identification. Here are the different alternative accounting methods available. We have first in, first out, which matches a withdrawal to the first available input by chronological date. Alternatively, last in, first out matches by the last available by chronological date. Ordinary load high matches a withdrawal to an input based on the lowest duty value per unit first. Notice these are not solely matched export to import, but rather withdrawal to input. That's intentional. And it's because all receipts and withdrawals, including domestically sourced or sold products, must be accounted for. Low to high average inventory turnover, items will be matched based on the lowest unit duty value first, again, but it's based on the average inventory turnover for each SKU. Domestic withdrawals are not required, so this method often requires the least amount of data. The most commonly used accounting method is the low to high blanket. Again, this matches an item to the lowest unit duty value first. It does not require withdrawals, and however, it does not require domestic withdrawals. However, you must be able to provide inputs into inventory for a period of 5 years. As I noted, this is a very common method, because it is so easy, but it is not always the method that will produce the highest recovery. Lastly, and least frequently used, is average. This is done by calculating the ratio of all units in the inventory at time of withdrawal and the total units of all receipts of the merchandise at the time of withdrawal, then applying the ratio to the quantity of that withdrawal. Using the t-shirt example where no unique identifier is available, we could assign a direct identification of that exported men's black t-shirt in size large based on an accounting method, maybe FIFO or LIFO, maybe low to high, etc. Next slide, thank you. Another way to claim drawback on unused merchandise is through substitution, known as 1313J2. This means that imports are matched by HTS to HTS. This means that the SKU level detail is no longer required, and we're able to use data available in ACE, drastically simplifying the burden on the importer to provide import documents and data. The imported goods and exported goods do not need to be the same product. They only need to share the same HTS, And domestically sourced goods that are ultimately exported are eligible too, as long as they share the same HTS code. Other benefits of substitution is that we can claim the highest duty first and don't require all imports in order to prepare a claim. Unused merchandise substitution often seems too good to be true, but there are some limitations. One, we are not allowed to claim on exports to Canada, Mexico, Chile, or certain U.S. territories. Additionally, classifications that begin with the word other at both the 8 and the 10-digit HTS level are ineligible. We'll take a look at this in more detail on the next slide. Lastly, drawback is assessed using the lesser of calculation, meaning the duty will be calculated on the lower value of the imported versus exported value. This is calculated by dividing the entered line value by the entered line quantity. Let's revisit our men's black t-shirt scenario. Under direct identification, either the same exact shirt would have to be imported and ultimately exported, or the same style of the men's large black t-shirt would have to be exported, matched back to an import through the designated accounting method. Now let's imagine the same apparel company sources a different style t-shirt in a different size and color from a company in the US. Yet the shirts still share that same HTS code. Say these domestically sourced shirts are ultimately exported to Europe. The company can substitute the domestically sourced shirts to claim back the duties and fees paid on the foreignly sourced t-shirts. As mentioned, there are certain wide-ranging other, and basket HTS classification subheadings that are not eligible for drawback under substitution. This is designed to encourage companies to find more defined and appropriate classifications for their products. You can see merchandise that does not begin with the word other at the 8-digit HTS subheading is fine to claim under substitution. Substitution is also allowable when the 8-digit HTS subheading begins with the word other and the 10-digit does not. Merchandise may not be substituted if the 8-digit HTS and the 10-digit HTS number begin with the term other. Additionally, basket provisions where the 10-digit HTS statistical number begins with the term other are also ineligible. Next, we will review manufacturing drawback. Manufacturing drawback is for when imported duty-paid components are used to manufacture articles which are exported or destroyed. Manufacturing is defined as being made into a new and different article, or made for a particular use. Often, this is a change in classification from import to export, and both direct identification and substitution apply. Direct identification manufacturing, known as 1313J1, 1313JA, third time's the charm, 1313A, allows imported components used in manufacture or production of exported or destroyed articles to be claimed for drawback. Substitution manufacturing, known as 1313B, allows claimants to match the 8-digit HTS of each component used to produce the exported article with an import that shares the same 8-digit HTS classification. This means that regardless of whether the component was imported or domestically sourced, or whether the import was actually used in a manufacturing operation, it may be claimed in drawback. Exports to Canada and Mexico are allowed under manufacturing drawback, but are subject to the lesser of requirement, where only the lesser of duty paid upon import into the US or the lesser of duty paid into Canada and Mexico can be claimed. Often manufactured products are entered into Canada and Mexico with zero duty, which eliminates the opportunity for drawback. Next slide, please. Rejected merchandise. This can fall into 4 categories. 1, non-conforming to sample or specification. 2, items have been shipped without consent of the consignee. 3, items have been determined to be defective at the time of importation. These 3 rejected provisions allow for the standard 5-year time frame from import to export or destruction, and may be claimed under a direct identification. The 4th is goods sold at retail and returned to the importer. Retail returns is the only of the rejected merchandise drawback provision that matches based on substitution by unique product code, or that style, color, size level. This provision is similar to drawback before TEFTIA, if any of you on the call have been around during that time. Additionally, other classification and basket provisions can be claimed. No fees, including HMF or MPF, are eligible, and exports are not permitted to Canada or Mexico. Additionally, the exportation or destruction of this product must occur within 1 year of importation. We are still able to claim 5 years from importation to claim filing, though. While I don't want to spend too much time on Canadian drawback, this is a great cost-saving service you may want to take advantage of if you qualify. So the basics, they're very similar to US drawback, but it's even simpler. We can claim 4 years from date of import to claim filing, 5 years for destroyed goods. There's no application required prior to claim submission. Items intending to be destroyed must be made available for examination by Canada Border Services Agency, or CBSA. Claims will be approved or denied within 90 days of filing, or interest will be paid to the claimant. Lastly, I want to note, Canadian GST tax is not eligible for drawback, but is often recoverable, and we can recommend a company that we partner with specializing in the recovery of GST. Next, drawback process and requirements. Here is a standard drawback program timeline for Flexport. After the initial scoping call and service agreement are complete, we will begin preparing the combined drawback privilege application. This application allows you to claim on any historical exports or destruction and waives the need for CBP to examine or witness any future exports or destruction, in addition to receiving accelerated payment, which allows for a drawback claim to be paid automatically within 4 to 6 weeks of claim filing, instead of being paid at time of liquidation. A decision sometimes takes 4 to 6 months to receive from CBP, so we'd like to prioritize this along with any manufacturing rulings that may be needed, which may take up to a year for CBP to approve. We will begin then to gather data required to prepare your first drawback claim. This is sometimes a timely and challenging process, as gathering data for 5 years back can be tough. We have some great solutions to help with that we'll be able to discuss later. Once the drawback claim is ready, we will file it. If accelerated approval has been received, the claim will be paid within 4 to 6 weeks from date of claim filing. It is standard practice of CBP to issue a full desk review on the first claim. Flexport will manage this and draft the response on your behalf. We typically have 30 days to respond to this. We then enter the ongoing loop of a drawback program. Goods are imported, they are exported or destroyed, the data is collected, claims are filed, and drawback refunds are received. This process then repeats. We determine a cadence that makes the most sense for your program based on how many exports and how large the program is. Typical time frames may be once a year, twice a year, quarterly, even monthly, or more frequently if needed. The success of a drawback program depends largely on the quality of data and documents available. While we need documents to substantiate a claim, the goal is to truly have quality data sources to generate your claim. When the data is not accurate or not available at all, we may defer to the supporting documents to obtain the needed criteria. This picture is a great representation of where that data or where the documents are needed. So for imports, typical documents are the 7501, commercial invoice, packing list, bill of lading. Additionally, we need bill of materials or for manufactured processes or even for kits, transfer of merchandise if applicable, inventory records, export or destruction data or documents, that is bill of lading, commercial invoice, packing list. If exporting to Canada or Mexico, we need the Canadian B3 or the Mexican pedimento. Next, I will send it over back to Monica to discuss estimating your refund.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Once you've determined that you have a viable drawback opportunity, how do you estimate your refund potential? One way to get a ballpark estimate and set a reasonable starting point on what your annual drawback recoveries might look like is to take your import duty spend over the last year and multiply that by the percentage of your overall sales that were exported. This will give you a high-level estimate of your annual drawback potential. Another way is to look at the cost of goods sold for your exported sales for the last year, or up to the full 5-year claim period, and multiply that by your average duty rate paid on your imported goods, and again, we'll get a high-level estimate of your drawback potential. Common drawback challenges. One of the common drawback challenges we come across includes the difficulty in obtaining export or destruction documents. This seems especially true in e-commerce, where exporters predominantly rely on couriers for parcel shipments, where bills of lading or proofs of delivery are often only available through a website for a few months or until the tracking number is recycled. If you're already a drawback filer or plan to be in the future, we recommend implementing a process to store those documents regularly so you can access them timely to support your export in the event of an audit. This goes for standard carriers also. Be sure to keep your export bills of lading and maintain and keep organized records of both your import and export documents. For destruction, whether shredded at a destruction facility or landfilled by waste management, CBP would require withdrawal from inventory, transportation to the third-party destruction facility, an invoice for services, and a signed certificate of destruction. During the application and during a desk review, CBP is looking to connect the dots between documents through linked references, so using a job number or other unique identifier on your documents will streamline the process. Another challenge is accessible import and export data. Work with your brokers to ensure they're filing your entries and capturing the data elements that will support your drawback program. Be sure they are regularly providing you with the import entry packets. If Flexport is your broker, we have processes in place to make drawback a product of our partnership instead of an administrative burden. All of this that we frequently see is with unused direct identification. This is a provision predominantly on exports to Canada and Mexico. The SKU number with packing list level detail, including style, color, and size, is required. Is this level of detail captured by your broker? If not, do your receiving reports capture this level of detail and maybe even reference the entry documents through a PO number? If neither of those are happening, is that detail included on the import documents? Does your supplier include the SKU number on the import invoice? Does your SKU number change between import and export? Does your inventory withdrawal identify your sales order or transfer number? And is that number on your export invoice? Is it referenced on the bill of lading? Remember, when preparing applications, claims, and responding to customs desk reviews, we're connecting the dots, drawing a line from import to export, so the more connections that are documented, the better. Another very common challenge that has more recently drastically affected potential drawback claimants is the regulations surrounding retail returns. Returns of opened items from retail that are commingled with unsold inventory and could be exported could render your entire inventory ineligible for unused merchandise drawback and disqualify all exports to Canada and Mexico. If you accept retail returns, we suggest you separate your returned open box merchandise from new inventory, either physically or by other inventory controls. It's important to ensure domestic returns will not be exported, and if they are, that they can be separately traced to a return. Some recommendations are to implement a sticker system whereby if your returns are sent to the same warehouse where orders are fulfilled, placing a red sticker, for example, on all returns and implementing a policy where no merchandise with a sticker can be exported. Another option would be physically separating returns to another area of the warehouse where they will not be exported and claimed for drawback, or adding a suffix like a -R to the SKU number upon receipt of the return to separate returns electronically. This will unlock drawback eligibility for North American exports and or open up the opportunity to claim returns under the retail return provision. Lastly, keeping up to date with drawback changes and updates, both in terms of policy and also changes to your business. Keep communications open and advise any changes that may yield new opportunities for drawback. What are some other strategies to maximize your potential refund? Intentional entry construction. For substitution drawback, because of the lesser of calculation used to calculate import duty, entry construction could dramatically help or hinder your recovery. If you have an entry where all goods classifiable under the same HTS number are grouped on one entry line, but the price is variable, you could end up with a low per unit duty average, even though you may be able to claim higher valued exports, matching to higher valued average duty per unit import entry lines if you don't group your entry lines. Where substitution drawback may be operating concurrently with direct identification drawback matched by a unique identifier tracing an import to an export. Once an export is claimed, say under substitution against an import entry line, that line cannot be used to claim drawback under direct identification, which can lower your recovery. Reassess your accounting method. If you're matching imports to exports through an accounting method, be sure to know the requirements and limitations of each accounting method. One example here could be if you've recently moved your sourcing from China to another country with lower tariffs or no tariffs, and you're using a low to high inventory methodology, particularly if a relatively low percentage of your sales are exported, you may have little to no drawback opportunity. Using a FIFO methodology in this case may yield a much greater return. More strategic utilization of accounting methods may result in higher recoveries. Control your HTS classifications. For substitution programs, be sure to confirm the classification of your products. You may even consider pursuing binding rulings. There's a couple of reasons for this. Customs will ask for verification of your import versus export classifications from time to time, and an export of a cotton t-shirt claimed against a polyester t-shirt will be questioned. Another reason is that earlier in the presentation, we covered how certain HTS classifications are not eligible under substitution, including those classified as other at both the 8 and 10 digit level. More specific classifications, if possible, may not only be more accurate, but may also open up greater drawback potential. Regularly look for opportunities. Review your supply chain for opportunities through third parties who may export or destroy your products. Confirm whether your domestic vendors import or domestic customers export or destroy. Identify whether your donations are exported. Some deep diving of your supply chain may result in more drawback eligible transactions. Back to you, Sam.
So why Flexport? When paired with Flexport brokerage, Drawback is an integrated part of our world-class technology platform. We're happy to manage your drawback program, even if you're new to Flexport and your imports are managed by another provider. However, Flexport captures detailed import data, gives immediate access to your import documentation, and provides visibility to your drawback claims. This automation truly helps streamline the administrative process for all parties involved. Improving your drawback process. Here are some common complaints we often hear about drawback. 1, that drawback is too manual. By leveraging technology, Flexport is able to automate data collection, document ingestion and digitization, even data validation, and claim generation. We often hear the data needed is unreliable. Drawback often requires data that is cobbled together from various sources, resulting in lost revenue or worse, disqualification from recovery. When imports and other transactions are performed with Flexport, that granular level data necessary to facilitate the drawback recovery is readily available. Flexport can also review and store data filed by other brokers. Lastly, we often hear there is little visibility to the drawback claim activity. With Flexport, you will have instant access at any time to all drawback claims, claim data, and all supporting documentation right on our platform. Instant drawback is one of our clients' favorite Flexport offerings. If enrolled, Flexport will outlay 70% of your total claim value within 1 day of claim filing, instead of that 4 to 6 weeks later if approved for accelerated payment, or if that accelerated payment approval is still pending, you may be waiting 4 to 6 months or even up to a year. The remaining 30% will be paid to you, less our fees once the drawback payment has been received by Flexport. The advance fees of 2 to 10% is dependent on whether a claimant has been approved for accelerated payment or not. This is a great opportunity to get money back into the company's hands even faster. Modernize your drawback. With Flexport, you are getting exceptional expertise with a dedicated drawback staff, advanced technology, quality data with access to your Flexport import and export data. We utilize optimized algorithms for better import and export matching, generating 10 to 15% more recoveries for substitution claims than the current industry provider, industry standard. On our platform, you will have visibility through the claim process, and with our automations, we are often able to beat competitors' pricing. Let's take a look at our fee structure. Our service fees vary based on your specific drawback opportunity. The factors determining the fee charged are based on the estimated drawback refund recovery and the overall program complexity. Structured as a percentage of the recovery and invoiced at the time of refund receipt. In most cases, we receive the check and issue you your refund, less our commission. So there's no out-of-pocket or upfront cost associated, other than possibly a one-time flat fee charged for the preparation and filing of the drawback privilege application. ACE analysis. Anyone attending today's webinar can have a complimentary ACE analysis. Flexport has designed an ACE analysis tool that pulls together data from multiple providers using the last 5 years of your data. It's a service we offer that can reveal savings and compliance risks and may help identify your drawback potential. And Monica, I will go back to you.
All right. Thanks again, Sam. So today we've gone over some of the basics of drawback, procedures you can implement to expand your opportunity, and the expertise and technology offered by Flexport's dedicated drawback team to simplify an otherwise often complex process. We're here to manage your program in its entirety, determine if you have a drawback opportunity, navigate you through the process, assist you in understanding the regulations, draft and file all applications, prepare and submit claims, submit responses to customs inquiries, track recoveries, work to identify new drawback opportunities, and offer creative solutions to optimize drawback recoveries while being supported by the Flexport platform and customs compliance and trade advisory teams to maximize your drawback and keep you in full compliance. Keep in mind that customs refunds close to $4 billion annually in drawback, but drawback continues to be an underutilized program with billions more unclaimed. If you think you may have an opportunity, feel free to reach out to us at drawback@flexport.com, and we're happy to start the process and help get your drawback program underway. You can also find more information about drawback and other services at flexport.com. At this time, we'll open it up for some Q&A, and a reminder to please add your questions to the Q&A function on the right. If we don't have time to answer all the questions, we can send you a response by email. Okay, I think we'll start out with if we don't have SKU level import data, can we still claim drawback? Short answer to that one is yes. Generally, yes. If you don't have SKU level import data, that type of information is not captured on your broker reports from another broker that you have. You may not have that level of granularity on your receiving reports. If you have access to your import entry packets, we can receive those packets, digitize your entry packets, get and extract that data that we need in order to prepare and file claims.
I'll take the next one. You've mentioned ACE a couple times. What is it? ACE is the Automated Commercial Environment. It is a CBP web-based environment. This is where we gather a lot of reports. It is really a centralized location intended to bring the trade partners, government agencies, and CBP together.
All right, I will take this next one. Can multiple types of drawback be used at the same time? Yes, often. Sometimes it can be challenging, and it really depends on the provisions that would be mixed if they're going to be overlapping during the same time period. It can be challenging sometimes mixing something, for example, any kind of a substitution provision with an unused direct identification provision using an accounting method. Generally, if it's over the same time period, unless the what would be claimed under an unused direct identification would be only on goods that are classified under ineligible substitution classifications, so that there's complete separation between the two provisions. That's one option. Also claiming potentially under different time periods. If you do have a substitution provision mixed with an unused direct identification where the imports to exports are explicitly identified, for example, through a serial number, that would be an example of being able to mix those two provisions. I would note that if you feel like you may have an opportunity for more than one drawback provision, applying for both at the same time, if possible, because that to be able to take advantage of both the one-time waiver and waiver of prior notice on both of those provisions.
Another question. For exports to countries other than Mexico or Canada, do we need import entry documents for those countries? The answer is no. What we would look for is a signed bill of lading and potentially a proof of delivery. That typically proves the date and fact of exportation out of the US.
Can you get duty drawback when you import and manufacture but do not export? That kind of depends. So in order to claim drawback, there has to be an export taking place. So if you are importing, you're manufacturing, you may be selling to a domestic customer that is exporting, then that customer would be able to potentially assign you the right as the importer and manufacturer, the right to claim drawback, as long as you're able to have access to their export information, then you would have the opportunity. So there still does have to be that import and export factors in order to claim drawback and have an opportunity there. Let's see. Another one I see is most of our exports are to Canada. What if we have customer returns that are in new condition but might have been open that are put back into inventory? So right now, the customs interpretation on any returns of potentially used or open merchandise back into inventory that are commingled with that inventory would not be eligible for drawback, and would not be eligible on exports to Canada. If, however, those returns are in original unopened packaging, they could be claimed under a direct identification to Canada, and that would be eligible. But right now, the interpretation of customs is that anything that has been sold could have been used, even something like trying something on and tags are still intact and shipped back without what mostly would be considered use, would not be eligible for drawback. If those returns were separated from your other unsold inventory, they could be eligible under a retail return provision, but would not be eligible for that to Canada, as Canada and Mexico are not eligible under that provision.
I see another question. If we have imported from China and exported to Canada, EU, UK, then which kind of drawback are we eligible for? And you could file under a couple of provisions. I'm assuming these are unused products. So if Canada is a high export destination, likely J1 will produce the highest recovery. That's unused merchandise direct identification. If we leave Canada off the table, you can also file unused substitution. Sometimes there's a lot. You also want to consider the HTS codes that are being utilized. So either those two, it would be hard to say which one would produce the most recovery without knowing the data a little bit more.
Okay. Instead of going back up to 5 years, could you start fresh from now, moving forward in simply the process? Understanding you will likely be leaving money on the table, but limited resources to retrieve past data. It, again, kind of depends really on an accounting method, or if you need an accounting method. If your exports are predominantly not to Canada and Mexico, and we'd be implementing a substitution program, we could start essentially from now or 1 year back, or moving forward, and that would be simple to do under that type of a provision. If you were to be claiming under a direct identification, so you have predominantly exports to Canada or Mexico, if we were to implement typically like a LIFO methodology, might be one where we could have not go back that full 5 years on your import data. And we would simply be looking for, starting from a more recent inventory. There would be some left on the table, but it would be a place to start. And also, if you would be able to not use an accounting method and explicitly identify through a unique identifier, we could also start anytime, not having to go back those 5 years. Or even another accounting method like an average inventory turnover. If you have your longest average inventory turn on, say, one of your SKUs is 1 year, we could go 1 year back on that import data and claim just from 1 year and forward.
All right, I see there's a lot of questions in the queue. We'll take 2 more and then wrap this up. If we are importing and exporting with multiple brokers, can Flexport help process drawback for all of the import exports together, done with other brokers as well? Simple answer, absolutely we can. It may be challenging to get the data needed from the broker, depending on the data elements that they capture. We may have to get the hard copy documents, the 7501 commercial invoice packing list, but absolutely, and we do that frequently.
Okay, I think the last one we're going to take is we've used a competitor for our current drawback program, but our last drawback claim with them was over a year ago. Can we go back to the last claim filed and move forward with you from there, or do we have to start as of our start date if we go with Flexport? So we did not answer this one already, I don't believe. Yes, we can pick up where your previous provider left off. We're actually able generally to obtain a lot of the claim information from ACE, and depending on whether you were claiming under a substitution, an accounting method, or a direct identification, sometimes it's simpler than others, but it's certainly something that we can do transitioning from one drawback service provider to Flexport.
Wonderful. Thank you all for getting your questions in. There are a lot, so we will ensure that we get an answer to your question and get that sent to you, I believe, via email. Otherwise, that concludes today's webinar. Thank you to everyone in the audience for attending. If you would like to reach out to the customs team, or you would like the Flexport team to reach out to you, please vote yes in the open poll. You can email us at customsbd@flexport.com or drawback@flexport.com. A reminder to please fill out our feedback survey before exiting. Thank you again. It was a pleasure presenting to you, and have a great day.